Hi everyone, this is Ashley with CTMina Digitals. I'm going to do a tutorial to show you how to use my new blurred office backdrops in Photoshop. I'm going to have all different kinds of sets, or I plan to have all different kinds of sets of these in the shop, but I wanted to do a sample kind of to use for all of them. So like it says in the description, these backdrops will be blurred at different depths of field because they're intended for headshots for different types of professions or businesses. So you want to try to shoot for, if you know you have a session coming up and you're going to want to use these, obviously, for just like any other digital backdrop, try to shoot for it. So he is on more of a beige brown backdrop, and that's kind of the tones that are in this image. So if you have like a light, bright backdrop, maybe shoot on white. If you have like a darker office, has a lot of black in it, maybe shoot on black. It's just a lot easier when it comes to copying and pasting your subjects into the backdrops. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to come over to my subject. I'm just going to go to my quick selection tool and select subject right here up at the top. Wait for that to work. Once it's selected, I'm going to go up to edit and copy, go back over to my digital, edit and paste. Now the first thing you want to look for is going to be your light source and if it's coming from the right way. I was already playing around with this image for a little bit before I did this, but if I go back up, it was actually the backdrop was actually flipped, and I flipped it the other way to match the light coming onto his face. You want to do that because you don't typically want to switch this or flip the subject, because if they have specific features or something on their face, then it's going to be on the other side. So if you need to flip one for light sources, I recommend flipping the digital backdrop. Now you don't want them to look really small in this. That wouldn't make any sense because headshots for this type of photo, the background is blurred, there's lots of bokeh, they're going to be close to your camera. So they're going to take up most of the frame of the digital backdrop. This is the purpose for these kind of backdrops. He's close to your lens, he's close to your camera, and this backdrop of his office is kind of just fading off into the distance of the background. Now, some things I like to do to help blend into the background. Photoshop does a really good job usually with selecting the subject and putting them into the image. But if we zoom in, we can see sometimes it copies and pastes part of the old backdrop. So all you have to do is click on your subject layer and create a layer mask. Go over and grab a soft brush at 100% opacity, soft black brush at 100% opacity. You're going to have to resize your brush as needed, just depending on wherever you need to brush off of. Now since he's going to be a little bit, we don't want to do a really sharp brush or too small of a brush. Now there's this line all the way around, and you can go around and brush that all off. It could take a little while. Or something I do, you could go back to your subject layer, you could grab your blur tool. It's at 100%. I'm going to use a smaller one, and I'm just going to go around the very, very edge of his jacket here. Now I'm going to go over to my layer mask and grab my brush, because I would definitely brush this off. That's a big chunk that copied over. Come back over here, grab my blur tool. This is just going to not make that line noticeable or visible, and then it's just going to make a nice transition from the edge of your subject into that backdrop. It'll make it blend really nicely. The hair sometimes, oh, I think my Photoshop froze. Okay, I'm going to zoom in again. My Photoshop froze. I had to open it up my file again. I still have my blur tool. I'm just going to keep going around the very, very edge and just keep, now his hair, sometimes Photoshop copies and pastes a little bit wonky, but I'm just going to blur the very tips of the top up here, and that's going to help blend them right in. You don't always have to do that, but if they have a lot of flyaways or hair like this that's sticking up a lot, I do that to blend it in. And I would fix up I would use my brush and maybe fix up his ear a little bit up here so that obviously doesn't look like that. Go back to my blur tool, just around the edge and zoom out, and I would be done with this. You don't have to add any blur to him. You don't have to do anything to the backdrop because I already have. The only thing that you might have to do is if you wanted to make your subject really big in here and you wanted to make it seem like you were shooting with like an 85 or something and you wanted to blur the backdrop even more. I do suggest if you do that, if you go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you add like a lot more blur to the backdrop, add noise because that's probably going to create banding. So if you do that, if you add more blur to the backdrop, also go up to filter, noise, and add noise, and I recommend anywhere from 1.5 to 2%. If I go in, I'm going to zoom in real quick on the backdrop after I added that blur. If I go away, I wonder if you can see the banding in here. I don't know if you can, but I can. All around here, there's banding in the backdrop before we created that or added that noise. So if I go up to filter, noise, add noise, as you can see, added that noise and the banding completely went away. Oops, I didn't mean to move that. Oops. Add noise again. I don't know how I ended up doing that. All right, there we go. So anytime you have banding in your image, just add a little bit of noise and it will correct it, unless it's really bad. Sometimes if you paint on too much or add too much blur, you can have a hard time bringing it back. I think that is it. If you have any questions and you're a studio photographer, I would love for you to join my group on Facebook. I will link it in the description.